And they're also, for the first time, Medicare will be allowed to negotiate drug prices on certain drugs. And then with the tax provision.
네, 안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 8월이에요, 여러분. 8월달. 오늘은 8월 7일 일요일입니다. 지금 다들 여름 휴가 시즌이죠. 다들 잘 쉬고 계신가요? 7월 31일 날 세 번째 오픽을 봤습니다. 올해 세 번째 오픽이었는데 또 2급이 나왔어요. 문제는 쉬웠는데 대답을 확실히 1급이 나올 정도까지 못했습니다. 네, 맞습니다. 영어 공부를 더 했어야 되는데 아직 많이 부족합니다. 여름이죠. 엄청 더워요. 내일부터는 또 비가 쏟아진다고 합니다. 장마가 시작이 된다고 해요. 그리고 전쟁은 계속하고 있고 네, 뭐 그렇네요. 뭐 딱히 할 말은 없네. 요즘에도 밥을 너무 많이 먹어서 배가 진짜 너무 많이 나왔어요. 살이 좀 찐 것 같습니까? 카메라로 봤을 때 크게 달라진 건 없어 보이죠? 일단 스트레칭하고 팔굽혀펴기를 조금만 하겠습니다. 너무 피곤해요. 내일부터 이제 다시 수영을 갑니다. 제가 한 3일 쉬었는데 3일 동안은 수영을 안 갔어요. 운동할 때는 쉬어야죠.
For Wisconsin, as well as portions of Minnesota and Ohio. They've had several inches of rainfall within the past couple of days, more precipitation on the way. You can see the bulk of the rainfall across Kentucky, really located across the central parts of the state, away from the hardest hit areas. But nonetheless, any additional rainfall, of course, could lead to localized flash flooding in that area as summertime thunderstorms continue to fire up. Weather Prediction Center has a moderate risk of flash flooding today across the greater Milwaukee, Wisconsin area. The shading of yellow is a slight risk. That includes the Chicago suburbs. So some of these thunderstorms could produce easily 1 to 2, even locally higher amounts of rainfall as they start to fire up later this afternoon, riding along a frontal boundary draped across the upper Midwest. So the other big story we're monitoring is the heat. Over 60 million Americans under heat alerts right now, including many of the most populated areas of our eastern seaboard, Boston, New York, Philadelphia. This is including upstate New York as well and into the Hudson Valley. Temperatures today will range from the lower to middle 90s, but it's when you factor in the humidity, that's when it really starts to feel balmy outside. The central parts of the country, more the same, heat indices above triple digits. You can see the actual temperatures in the Pacific Northwest also starting to spike in temperatures right through the early parts of the week. We'll top 100 degrees in Portland, Oregon. And then, by the way, Linda, we are monitoring the tropics starting to come alive. We've got a 40% chance of our fourth named storm developing here in the coming days.
All right, we'll keep a close eye on that. Derek Van Dam for us. Thanks so much. Well, as monkeypox spreads around the world, so does the need to make people aware of the dangers. Ahead, how this adult film entertainer is sharing his experience with the disease on social media to help educate others.
I ran twice, I won twice, and did much better the second time than I did the first, getting millions and millions of more votes.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump rehashes old grievances while teasing a future White House run. Those details ahead.
My exclusive joint interview, Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, where they can compromise and where they clash, plus Stacey Abrams on her run for governor of Georgia.
State of the Union, tonight on CNN.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
It's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Prevented from going to school. Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
The world's biggest business stories in one place. Expert analysis from every corner of the globe. Marketplace, Africa, Asia, Europe. Business.com.
Once in a generation opportunity.
Technology, innovation, business. When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels, connected to your world.
I'm Nida Bashir in Istanbul, and this is CNN. Welcome back to our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Linda Kincaid, and this is CNN Newsroom. We are keeping a close eye on the monkeypox virus outbreak as it spreads around the world. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control says more than 7,500 cases are reported here in the U.S., more than any other country. The Biden administration declared the outbreak a public health emergency on Thursday, and there are more than 28,000 cases in 88 countries. Countries highlighted in the color red and orange on this map have the most cases right now. Health officials warn that the majority of reported cases are in men who have sex with men, but they caution that anyone can get monkeypox. CNN's Salma Abdelaziz spoke with an adult film entertainer who wants to use his experience with the virus to help curb its spread.
Hey guys, day 15 of monkeypox.
After adult film entertainer Silver Steele tested positive for monkeypox, he started to document his painful struggle from isolation in Texas.
I don't want anybody to have to go through this, so if my story will help people possibly change their behaviors or attempt to go get vaccinated, then it'll be worth it.
It's a trend. Social media is key to raising awareness at ground zero of this health crisis, the gay community. 98% of cases so far are among men who have sex with men, according to the World Health Organization. But sex is not required to transmit the virus. It's passed on primarily through close skin-on-skin physical contact.
Do you feel that there is a stigma?
100%. First of all, it's easy to label it as a gay disease, but this virus doesn't go, oh, I'm going to find a gay person. Oh, look, there's another gay person. It's just going to find a human.
From a sexual health clinic in East London, Dr. Ian Reeves says he witnessed the early days of the outbreak.
To start off with, all of us were a little bit in the dark, to be honest with you. It's not an infection that I was familiar with at all.
Now healthcare workers are playing catch-up, trying to vaccinate those most at risk faster than the virus can spread.
Clinics like this one had to react quickly to the outbreak, training their staff, preparing tests, giving out dozens of vaccinations a day. It's put a strain on health services, and there's no sign the demand is letting up.
Word of mouth and public messaging are driving more and more to come forward for their shots.
And people are, I think, taking this seriously and making sure that they're protecting themselves and protecting each other and the rest of the community.
But monkeypox cases are still on the rise. And with limited vaccine supply, containment still presents a challenge.
Seeing that some friends of mine had it, they had it quite bad, so I thought better work.
And healthcare workers are scrambling to access a historically marginalized population.
One of the concerns I have is that the people that will get into the vaccine clinics are going to be kind of the best connected, and so that can leave people who, historically are less well served by health services behind a little bit.
And that's why, alongside public health messaging, grassroots voices are making an impact. So far, more than 1 million people around the world have viewed Steele's video.
How does that make you feel to know that your message is being heard?
Fulfilled. That what I'm going through, what other people are going through, isn't for nothing. Because I'm telling you, you don't want this. It's painful.
A community rallying to prevent a new disease from taking hold. Salma Abdulaziz, CNN, London.
Well, for more on this, let's bring in Kai Kupfer-Schmidt, a contributing correspondent for Science magazine. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
So you wrote, as an infectious disease reporter, you've seen how deadly stigma can be, and as someone living with HIV, you've experienced the suffering that stigma can cause. What is the specific risk with monkeypox?
Well, I mean, stigma has a lot of effects, of course, right? And if you take a disease like monkeypox, it's related to sex. It's it can be even just in the way that it looks. It can be very stigmatizing. The name itself is stigmatizing. I mean, all of these things together, what they do is that they make it harder for people to seek care, to access care, to maybe even get tested in the first place. To just accept in a way that this is a risk for you. I remember very well, I went to Tanzania years ago and I spoke with people who were living with HIV back then, and I asked them what the biggest reason was that they thought that we still weren't getting ahead of HIV, and they said, it's the stigma. And then years later, when I got my own diagnosis, I remember standing literally in front of the mirror trying to say the word, okay, I am HIV positive. And there's something that you have to deal with. You have to bring yourself in that disease in a way, in some relation, and that's what stigma is to some extent. And so it is a huge concern in this disease as it is in HIV.
And so tell us more about the parallels you see with the response to monkeypox right now and the early days of the AIDS crisis.
So I think a lot of people are kind of taking the wrong lessons sometimes from HIV, or maybe they don't know the history that well. But remember that while there was a huge amount of stigmatization, and men who had sex with men were already exposed to that stigmatization before HIV, there was a moment early on in the HIV crisis where the biggest role that homophobia played was really to lead to a lack of care, a lack of access, a lack of caring in a way. So there was just, people tried to ignore this disease early on, and they acted way too late because they felt that it was only affecting this one sector of the community that they didn't care about so much. And that was one of the things that we really should take from the early days of the AIDS pandemic, is that it is important to jump on these things really early on and to give people the care and the access to care that they need. And I think we've seen in different places to different extent, but we have seen in this crisis again that didn't happen early on.
And Kai, in terms of access to care, I mean, monkeypox is not a novel virus. There is a vaccine that can prevent it. What's your response to the fact that there's not enough of that vaccine right now, and they're talking about splitting it?
Well, I think this is where you have to go and look at the bigger picture, right? I mean, the truth is that the world has never developed a vaccine against monkeypox, because while there were people suffering and dying from monkeypox in some countries in West and Central Africa, the rest of the world didn't really care all that much. Instead, we developed newer vaccines for smallpox because we were worried about, for instance, a bioterrorism event with smallpox. So what we have now is a vaccine that was developed against smallpox, and that can probably, that's what the data says at the moment, protect quite well against monkeypox. And this vaccine now is not available in the amounts that it should be because we haven't really thought about this kind of eventuality. And again, when monkeypox started spreading, when we saw these first cases in May, we didn't immediately jump on it as the world in a way that we maybe should have. So there's a lot of these kinds of mistakes that we keep making, I think.
So in terms of the data we've got, the WHO says that 98% of cases of monkeypox are amongst men who have sex with men. Can you explain from your
monkeypox가 원숭이 두창인가 보죠? monkeypox.
Yeah, so I think this is a really important point, because if we give these data and if we address the people who most need to be addressed, you know, the gay community, gay men and our sexual networks, we also need to explain why it is, because people rightly say the virus doesn't really care whether someone's gay or not, right? And that's true, but the virus does use, you know, it exploits human connections, it moves along the connections between human beings. And we've known for a while within the MSM community, there's a segment of the MSM community where people have a lot of sexual partners. And that just changes how a virus behaves in that kind of network. So it is easier for the virus to spread in that kind of network if there is a segment that has a lot of connections with each other. And that's what we're seeing, and it just makes the MSM community, makes my community much more vulnerable to a virus like this spreading. It doesn't mean that there's not other networks that are densely connected where this virus might be able to spread. It hasn't made its way yet into these networks. What we're seeing is, you know, isolated cases on the edges of the sexual network where maybe a household contact of someone is infected. But for the moment, it is spreading primarily within these networks, and that's where we have to concentrate our efforts, because that's our best chance of stopping this virus before it maybe mutates and changes, or maybe just moves into other networks, and it gets even harder to combat this.
Kai Kupfer-Schmidt, really good to get your perspective. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
A potentially hopeful sign in the fight against COVID-19 as nations around the world report a slowdown in new cases. Also, some countries, including Russia, have seen a dramatic rise in new infections over the last week. The World Health Organization reported Wednesday that the global tally of new cases was down 9% compared to the week before. Here in the US, President Joe Biden has tested negative for COVID a week after a week-long rebound infection. His doctor says Mr. Biden will remain in isolation until he tests negative a second time. Former US President Donald Trump received a hero's welcome in Texas Saturday. He was there to close out the annual Conservative Political Action Conference in Dallas. During his remarks, the former president repeated his baseless claims that the 2020 election was stolen and hinted that he could run again in 2024.
The election was rigged and stolen, and now our country is being systematically destroyed. If I renounced my beliefs, if I agreed to stay silent, if I stayed home, or if I stayed in my basement, the persecution of Donald Trump would stop immediately. That's what they want me to do, but I can't do that. And I will not do that because I love our country and I love the people of our country so much.
Well, while Trump did not announce another run for the White House, he did overwhelmingly win the CPAC straw poll. Nearly 70% of attendees who voted said they would prefer to see Trump as a Republican nominee in 2024. During his speech, the former president also painted a dismal version of the country under the Democratic leadership.
We gather tonight, our country is being destroyed more from the inside than out. America is on the edge of an abyss, and our movement is the only force on earth that can save it. We have to seize this opportunity to deal with the radical left, socialist lunatics and fascists, and we have to hit them very, very hard. It has to be a crippling defeat.
Well, fallout from the January 6th riot at the US Capitol was also front and center at this year's conference, such as this mock jail cell, with a man inside wearing an orange jumpsuit and a red Make America Great Again hat and pretending to cry. Well, still to come, Ukrainian forces push Russians out of a village in the south, but why the area still resembles a ghost town, even though Russian troops have been gone for weeks. That story ahead.
Africa. Businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me and Lenny Jocas as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections are revolutionizing commerce in Africa. This month, Connecting Africa through infrastructure.
When we develop the infrastructure, it will contribute to the country GDP.
Connecting Africa on CNN in association with Afrexim Bank.
We share this place, we all belong.
Ukraine's grain exports are starting to pick up speed, raising hopes that more food could soon be on the way to people who need it most. 4 more grain ships left Ukrainian ports this morning, loaded with close to 170,000 metric tons of food headed for Italy, China and Turkey. The UN estimates that 47 million people worldwide have trouble putting food on the table because of the war. As Ukraine begins to ramp up grain exports, it's also bracing for a possible Russian offensive in the south. That's where Ukrainian troops have been slowly regaining some ground. Hassina and crew went to one of the liberated villages in the region, and as our Nick Robertson found out, the residents aren't back home even though Russian troops are gone.
The road to Ivanivka isn't safe. Playboy, his war name, is taking us there across country. He says his forces recaptured it from the Russians following a 2-week artillery battle.
Second attack, go by feet.
That was a month ago. It's still deserted. Only abandoned pets and farmyard animals here now.
When you come in here and you look at the farm here, the animals left out, the dog in a terrible state, how do you feel?
I feel quite sad.
And when can people come back to this village?
I think when we will go
further forward,
further to the next line of the villages.
Unexploded shells litter the ground. The end of war a long ways off, he says.
I think it's not will finish very fast because we are not so powerful right now.
During the attack here, Ukrainian forces estimate they killed about 50 Russian soldiers, injured about 100 more. The big challenge for the Ukrainians now, mustering enough men to advance further.
The front line just a few kilometers away. A single artillery shell hits its target. The troops that took Ivanivka last month have moved on.
We are planning to move forward, sure.
When?
I don't know. For my own opinion, I think in a month.
At the village school, windows smashed, classrooms trashed, empty ration packs on the floor, and a message scrawled before they retreated.
The Russian troops have left a parting message. It says, Russia is everywhere. It has no borders. And over here they've crossed out the Ukrainian word for march and said, use the right language.
Where the Russians appeared to fight harder, frontline trenches near the village. Armoured vehicles and tanks taken out by artillery.
You get an idea of the ferocity of the fight here from the artillery impacts and the way the trees around here are all shredded.
But here's a surprise. Hitting these targets with US gifted M7 artillery wasn't as easy as the soldiers expected.
M7 shooting quite good, but now so good as we expected.